Hello and welcome to the Daily Geeky Pastimes Podcast, episode number 26. We record this every weekday morning on youtube.com/Geeky Pastimes live. You can join in, you can join the chat, let me know what you think of the things that I'm talking about. There's a siren outside at a really inopportune moment, just as I'm starting this. Apologies if you could hear that. And then also the VOD is available after the podcast has gone live, and you can listen to the audio on things like Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, all of those good places. Thank you, by the way, to everyone that does listen on those services. It's super nice to see that, my number of followers on Spotify and stuff like that is slowly going up. It's a platform that I never really thought I'd be a part of, but it's cool. It's a new potential place to get sponsors and stuff like that, so I'm excited about that. In today's podcast, that's so unprofessional. In today's podcast, the main thing I want to talk about today are what are the worst things in gaming. Like, I think we focus on Call of Duty quite a lot. And often about other games, I'm almost positive to a fault. Like, I try to look at the bright side of games. But there are a lot of things in gaming that really annoy me. And there's a lot of kind of trends in gaming that really annoy me. So we're going to go through basically a bunch of those. There's going to be a big old rant about all of the things that are wrong with gaming. Things that still happen in games that are super annoying. Some of them will be the old classics. Some of them will be new things, new trends that really annoy me. As always, if you're in the chat, let me know in the chat what sort of things annoy you. And if you're listening to this as like a VOD or a podcast, then let me know in the comments, what do you think is the most annoying thing to you in gaming? Or, even better, this would be the best kind of comment. If any of you are game developers and you know why some of the things I talk about are in games, and you can explain to me why it's a good thing they're in games, that would be even more interesting. I'm always super interested to hear from people that work on the games that we play, especially when it's something that like people complain about. I'm always interested to see what people have to say. But first of all, let's get on with some news. So just kind of free news stories today. It's been a very slow news weekend, I guess. There's just not been a lot. So the first thing is that the Park Beyond beta releases this afternoon. This is a game that some of you might know. It looks a little bit like sort of Planet Coaster, that sort of thing, Roller Coaster Tycoon, but I guess more modern than that. But it's got a lot of very different things about it too. So if I just put it up on the screen for people who are watching the video, you can see it's a lot more kind of simplistic in some ways than Planet Coaster. Like if you look at the layouts of it, it's much more almost like a grid, like Roller Coaster Tycoon used to be or Theme Park used to be. It looks like it's much more made around maybe the gameplay of designing a park that could make money and stuff like that. Although here, actually, you can see some paths that look a bit more like Planet Coaster placement. So maybe I'm talking nonsense. Maybe it's actually more like Planet Coaster. But it's just the one that they showed off in a trailer. But one of the big changes about this is rather than being based on real rides, which some of you might not know that Planet Coaster, I'm pretty sure all of the rides in that are real rides. They are things that either do exist or have existed in the past. This is going for much more of kind of a fantastical way of doing things. So there's roller coasters that don't necessarily make sense. I think like in one of the trailers, there's like roller coasters that do jumps and things like that. And there's like tiny little rides that kind of you get the sense of what they're meant to be, of like what type of ride they're meant to be. But it's much more than that. It's much more sort of magical, maybe a little bit fantastical. But the beta's coming out for this afternoon. I'm looking forward to having a go of it. I really like Planet Coaster, but I do find that I don't often have that. You can see they just put a cannon into a roller coaster to launch the car to a receiver. I think with Planet Coaster, a lot of the time I don't really have the patience for it. To make something that looks good in Planet Coaster takes a lot of effort. Like, takes a lot of time placing stuff, editing stuff. This looks much more like it's going to be about making something fun, making something quickly, making something that is a bit more like entertaining in terms of like the challenge of running the business. I think that's going to be the focus of it. So that'd be cool. It doesn't look like the theming and stuff like that is quite as involved. So people might not be able to make stuff that looks quite as spectacular as they can in Planet Coaster. But for normal people playing the game, maybe it'll be a bit more fun. But yeah, I'm excited about this. If they give me a beta code, I've applied through the normal ways. I've also tried repeatedly to get in touch with the developers of this and the publishers. If they give me a code for it, then I'll probably be streaming some of that this evening. I'm quite looking forward to that. Then The second news story is a game called Silica. So this is just hit early access. Jack Frags did a video on this the other day, a couple of days ago, I think, which I think is entertaining. Like if I just put on Jack's video for a bit, I'm sure he won't mind having a bit of his gameplay on here. But it is a real-time strategy / first-person shooter hybrid, and I think that is, I'll put it on screen there. And that's kind of an interesting thing in itself, but it's also a real-time strategy game that seems like it's almost, fairly heavily inspired by Starship Troopers. There's big deserty areas, there's big open areas, there's humans going around in like kind of near future technology stuff. There's a lot of machine guns and buggies and stuff like that. And then the aliens are, full of spikes and blades and stuff like that. And sometimes they're by themselves. Sometimes they're very much in a horde of enemies. And there's some really big ones as well. And there's big tanks and there's big enemies. Now, I think the way it works, and someone might be able to correct me, is that when you play a game, there's like 3 sides. And I think there's like 2 human sides and an alien side. And all of them are controlled by players. And the AI will take over. You can tell some units to go over and attack a base, and they will do that. Or you can take control of an individual soldier, you can take control of an individual alien or a tank or whatever, and then use them to, obviously do a bit more damage. And this isn't the first time that this sort of thing's happened. People will remember like Battlezone way back in the day worked like this. Command & Conquer Renegade had this kind of vibe. It's been tried a lot, and I don't think it's ever been super successful. Like, I think generally people have struggled to make something that has the kind of engaging side of a real-time strategy, which often requires a lot of, fast decision making, as well as the immersion required for a first-person shooter. Because, while you're a grunt on the ground, you're not really getting the big overview that you need to make good decisions about the real-time strategy side of it. But if you don't engage with the first-person shooter side, all of your units are super underpowered because they're much better when they're controlled by a human. Now, I think the way that this game's doing it, and again, I haven't played this yet, so I'm not entirely sure. I think the way that this game is doing it is that you have like a specified commander, like in the old, Battlefield 4 did this, didn't it? Or Battlefield 3, one of the Battlefields did it, where you had like a commander who would be doing all of the real-time strategy side of it. And then you have other players taking over the individual units. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see. I just saw Jack driving under a wheel or something. But yeah, we'll see how this goes. We'll see what comes of it. I really hope I get a chance to play it. Again, I've asked for a code for this, but it's Bohemia Interactive, who are a bit cagey about stuff like that. We'll see. Hopefully I'll get a chance to play this. If not, I might just buy it, because it does look like my sort of thing. It's just whether or not I can find a community of people who want to play it properly. Because I imagine if you're playing this and you don't have microphones and stuff set up, or you have random people playing, it's going to be a nightmare as a commander to get anyone to follow any instructions. That's normally what happens with games like this. If you're like Battlefield, you're trying to tell people what to do, and they're just playing a game, and some of them might not even be aware that you're a real person telling them what to do. They'll just ignore it. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I'm intrigued about that game. I think it looks kind of fun. I'm definitely up for playing it. Like, the crossover between Starship Troopers and Command & Conquer is like kind of enough to make me interested in it. There is actually a Starship Troopers game coming out soon as well. There's a first-person shooter, like co-op shooter thing, Starship Troopers Extermination, I think it's called, which isn't the best name, but the game looks fun, so I'm hoping I'll be able to play that sometime soon, and that would be exciting. Don't forget to hit the like button, by the way, those people who have come in to watch the stream, watch the podcast. And finally, the last thing that I'm very tentatively calling news, but I don't think it is news, and I know it's the sort of thing that people could easily misconstrue. But it's another Steam charts thing. Nearly every day, I check Steam charts because I'm curious about what games on Steam are doing better, and which games are kind of dropping out of favor. And it's a useful tool as a creator to just look at Steam charts, because sometimes there'll be a game that's like popping off, loads of people are suddenly playing it that you've never heard of, and it's like worth having a look at and being like, okay, why are people playing this? Like, why are people suddenly excited about this game? Because then you might be able to, find a new game to stream, find a new game to get ahead of the game on it and stuff like that. So it's useful. It's also useful because sometimes I want to play a game and then I look at Steam charts and I'm like, oh, nobody's watching that game anymore. Like, nobody's playing it. I'm going to have a hard time finding games. I'm going to have like very few people actually interested in it. And that's going to be a problem. It's like as as a good example, I'm still playing Redfall. I'm still really enjoying Redfall. Obviously Redfall's on Game Pass, so most people who play it, I imagine, will be on PC Game Pass. On Steam, there's 312 people playing Redfall. That kind of sucks. And like the most people that have ever been playing it was 1,560, which is such a tiny number. It's like it almost definitely wasn't worth them doing a release on Steam at all for that. But again, I'm sure that's because a lot of people are playing it on PC. A lot of people are playing it on Game Pass. But yeah, it's kind of interesting, especially when you see loads of people being like, "Oh my god, it's terrible that they released a game that's $70, and people have paid $70 to play this, and the experience isn't what I wanted." So I don't think many people paid $70 to play this because hardly anyone's playing it on Steam. But anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. But the thing I wanted to talk about was Call of Duty. And Call of Duty, the Steam charts for it are I think it's always interesting. I know people misinterpret the Call of Duty Steam chart stuff because they think that it somehow gives you an indication of how many people are playing in total. And I don't think it does. I don't think you can extrapolate anything about the complete total number of people playing Call of Duty based on the Steam charts information, just because Steam is almost definitely the smallest platform for Call of Duty. Most people who play on PC are probably still playing on Battle.net because that's where they played Warzone 1, that's where they played the last few Call of Duty games. And then, even then, most people who play Call of Duty aren't playing on PC. Console is much, much bigger. Like, people playing on PlayStation and Xbox would dwarf the numbers on PC. So it's like, it's a very small data point. But the trends are interesting. I think seeing how much it goes up and down is interesting. And right now, on Steam, there are 39,000 people playing Call of Duty, which, still isn't bad. Like, that's better than a lot of games. I think it still puts in like the top 20 games. But that's quite a worrying decline, I would say. Like, if you look at the 6 months since it came out, and I'll put this up on screen for people that are watching. If you look at the last 6 months since it came out, it started off at like 308,000 people playing, loads of people playing. And then, well, apparently 488,000 at some point. And then it sort of trailed off, which you'd expect. You expect there to be loads of people playing it at once when it first comes out, because everyone wants to play it like the first weekend. And then some people will go back to just playing it once a month, and some people will play it once a week, and some people will play it every day. So that number of like how many people are playing at any given time obviously comes down, and it doesn't really mean that much about the game. But then there's been these drops, and it's like you look at the big drops before went down to like 81,000, and now the drops are going down to 39,000. Like, the drops are really, really low, and lower than they ever have been before. Other than apparently there was one point on Wednesday, May the 3rd, where it went down to 31,000 for some reason. There was some insanely low drops, but I assume there was something wrong with Steam charts reporting or something like that. But yeah, I thought this was really interesting that it's like, if you look at like over the last month, it's kind of like been bobbling about in the middle, especially when we had the season 3 started. It kind of got a little bit of a boost, and then it's kind of dropped off again, and it's dropping off lower than it was before. And it's always interesting to think about, why that is. And it could be people waiting for Season 3 Reloaded, although I'd argue a lot of people don't even know that Season 3 Reloaded is a thing that's coming out tomorrow. There hasn't been like loads of advertising for it or anything like that. And it could be because the servers are booked. And I think that, to be honest, that's probably a big chunk of it, is there's a lot less people playing Warzone. Because right now, why would you play Warzone Battle Royale? If you load in to Battle Royale, in my experience with my friends, there's a decent chance the server will crash. Like, there's a more than 50% chance you won't get to the end of the game, in my limited experience. And that really, like, kind of sucks. So that's a big problem. That's something that's really dropping off. And one thing that's kind of worried me is that they haven't talked about that being fixed for Season 3 Reloaded. I haven't seen a post or a tweet or something where people are like, we have a fix in the works, it's going to come out on Wednesday. Like, the servers are going to be solid for Warzone Ranked or anything like that. I imagine they are working on it, but I just worry that they're a bit further away from fixing them before. And if Warzone Ranked launches with those server problems still, I don't think people are going to play it. I think Warzone Ranked, personally, I think Warzone Ranked is going to be a massive boost for Warzone. I think it's going to be like, you're going to see the player count shoot up. You're going to see it shoot up to near the top of the stream, like Twitch and stuff like that. I think it's going to be a big deal because loads of streamers are going to want to hop on and, get ranked, get into that top 250. loads of people are going to be watching it because it's kind of more exciting if you're watching a Warzone game where it's got some context. You know, like when people go for nuke runs, it's more interesting. You know, it's like, oh, they need to win this one or their nuke run's ruined. A similar kind of thing works with ranked, where it's like, oh, they need to win this one or they're going to get relegated to the next division, or they need to win this one to get promoted or whatever. That sort of stuff is way more interesting to watch. And so I think it's going to be really good, and it's going to keep normal people playing. Like, I'll play with my friends. If me and Name Gear and Emil hop on, and we know that, like, you know, oh, if we like keep on playing, if we do another couple of games, we might get promoted up to the next division. We're going to keep on playing. Whereas as it stands, the way we basically play, I mean, we play like once a month now. But when we do play lately, it's just like we'll play a handful of games, and then when we win one, we'll just stop. We'll just like win one, and then we'll be like, okay, that's cool. It's just going to be downhill from here, because, you know, it's not going to get any better than that. We're going to win a game, and then anything that happens after that is either going to be as good as that or worse. So it's like, that's a good place to stop. Whereas with ranked, I think it will keep people playing. So I think there's an opportunity for there to be a massive boost to Call of Duty with ranked. But if they haven't fixed these server problems that seem to be affecting the player count, or at least from my perspective, they're affecting the player count, that's going to be like really bad for the game, I think, like really worrying. So it's kind of, I imagine there's a lot of people working incredibly hard right now to be like, can we possibly fix the servers before tomorrow? Like, because I think it is going to be a make or break thing. If like the first week of Warzone ranked is spoiled by bad servers, by servers crashing, people losing skill rating, people getting kicked out of matches and then getting relegated or stuff like that, I genuinely think like it'll just kill the momentum and people won't be interested. People will be like, oh, I don't want to play Warzone ranked because the servers are crap. To the point where even I would say if they can't fix the servers by tomorrow, they should delay Warzone ranked. They should delay the start of the Warzone ranked season until they can fix it. Because otherwise it just doesn't make sense to me, like launching it with the game the way it is. And on top of that, you know, I know there's a bunch of other problems with Call of Duty, like there's lots of things I don't like about the game at the moment. I'm sure we'll talk about them on other podcasts. You know, I was talking a little bit. I got into a Twitter brief conversation where I saw Doug Dagnabbit, who's the guy who runs Mon Warzone. He tweeted something about Call of Shame, that hacker hunter channel who post just stupid, idiotic videos about accusing people of hacking. They posted something saying like, oh, like to get Call of Duty better, they need to remove buybacks and loadouts. And like Doug Dagnabbit said something like, you know, oh, this must be a joke. This must be satire. Like no one could be this stupid. And I replied being like, you know, I don't like that Call of Shame guy. And I think it'd be a terrible idea to get rid of buybacks. But I agree that loadout should be gone. I've said for ages, I think loadout should be out of Warzone. And my God, the replies to that, like, I mean, I've got some likes and stuff on that comment, but some of the comments you get, and I mean, and it's weird, whenever you engage with someone else's community, it's always super odd because the way they talk, like, you know, I'll read you some of the comments that I've got from replying to that tweet. Things like, things killing Warzone, weird-ass streamers like you and the soy boy devs. They already killed Warzone themselves. So, LMFAO, poor COD player, can't play a BR how it's meant to be played. Skull, no loadouts. What else is on there? I'm sure there was a few other things that was going there. Oh, Blackout was and then a swear word, failure. Wouldn't be fun if we all just said stupid something. Guess it was your turn. I think he meant wouldn't it be fun? That was something like that. Yeah, there's a bunch of people. Well, Warzone is loadouts and loadouts is Warzone. If they remove loadouts, it wouldn't be called Warzone. Plus, there are a ton of games out there that exactly fits what you want. Why do you want to ruin the experience for millions of players? We don't want Bow Wow reimagined LMFAO. We just wanted PUBG with COD movement and mechanics. I mean, that, to be honest, is I kind of agree with that. Leave and play something better. Can't kill a game that's already dead. 99% will kill for those effing streamers and cheaters, and then true Battle Royale that Warzone 1 and 2 was supposed to be more popular than it is now. I don't even understand that. But yeah, like I find it weird. I find the whole argument about loadouts slightly weird, that people seem to equate Warzone with loadouts as if like the only thing that makes Warzone good are loadouts. It's like that to me seems like utterly crazy. Like I just think like loadouts are just a part of Warzone, and to me, the worst part of Warzone. Like to me, loadouts are the thing that make Warzone bad. They're the thing that hold Warzone back in nearly every way. You know, other than the problems that all games have. You know, cheaters and server problems that need to be fixed. Obviously, the worst gameplay design thing in Warzone to me is the loadouts. And, you know, there's lots of people being like, oh, but what would they do about cosmetics? It's like, well, just do what they did with Blackout. Do what they do with Fortnite. Do what they do with PUBG. Just sell skins that when you pick up a gun, it applies that skin. It just seems, yeah, I don't know. It seems weird. We'll maybe save that for a topic tomorrow. Maybe we'll talk about it then. But it's very, very strange. I just find there's a lot of people saying things like, oh, well, if you don't want loadouts, then you should just go play PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. And it's like, that's a very different game, like incredibly different. There's so many differences between PUBG and Warzone that are nothing to do with the loadouts. The biggest one just being the way movement and shooting feels. Like that's such a significant difference. But Warzone also has things that differentiate it, like the gulag, like the contracts and stuff like that. But I would say by far the biggest thing that separates Warzone from any other battle royale is that it's Call of Duty. Like that to me is the unique selling point of Warzone, is that it is a battle royale with Call of Duty mechanics. And that's, you know, it feels like Call of Duty. The shooting's like Call of Duty. It plays fast like Call of Duty, as opposed to like H1Z1, PUBG, all of those games that are like much, much slower, much more kind of clunky. They're not smooth. They don't feel quite right when you're playing it, you know, if you're used to games like Call of Duty. And it's the same thing that like with Battlefield. With Battlefield's Firestorm, it had cool things about it, like the Firestorm itself, like the vehicle bunkers and all of that sort of stuff, the artillery and all of that stuff. But that wasn't what made it unique. The thing that made it unique is that it was Battlefield. You know, that it was a Battlefield game. It felt like a Battlefield game. The shooting was like a Battlefield game, but in a battle royale. And I think that's just cool. And I think they can change other things. I mean, obviously they can. I've never liked the whole argument when people say, oh, but it wouldn't be X, Y, and Z if you change something. Like when people say, like, it's not Star Wars if it doesn't have Jedi in it, or it's not, you know, it's not a Marvel Cinematic Universe thing if it doesn't have S.H.I.E.L.D. in it or something. Like, it is whatever they want to make it. Like, you know, if they want to make Warzone without loadouts, they could, and it would still be Warzone. Some people might not like it as much, and that's fine. But that doesn't mean it somehow loses what it is. Like, that just seems a really odd idea to me. Like, people have always said that about Ghost Recon. Like, this argument came up when Ghost Recon Frontlines was announced. That, like, I don't know if it was actually ever announced, but whatever happened with it, when people found out about it, and people were like, this isn't Ghost Recon. And then people had to, like, try and distinguish, you know, say, what is Ghost Recon? It's like, is Ghost Recon, like, Wildlands and Breakpoint? Like, is Ghost Recon a massive open world game where you take on missions and do whatever you want with vehicles and stuff like that? Or is Ghost Recon like Advanced Warfighter, where it's like a squad-based thing where you're using military technology, like near future military technology, in a sort of co-op environment to take other people down? Or is Ghost Recon what Ghost Recon originally was, which is more like a special forces, but in big open areas, trying to like snipe and use concealment and stuff like that, and the multiplayer being a big part of it? Like, Ghost Recon has changed ridiculously what it is, but it's still Ghost Recon because the people who make it are the people that made it, you know? Like it's a weird thing for like fans to start gatekeeping what is allowed to be Warzone or what is allowed to be Ghost Recon or Assassin's Creed. You know, people saying like Assassin's Creed Origins isn't Assassin's Creed game. You know, Assassin's Creed is like it's just going around in cities or whatever and stabbing things. It's like, look at Assassin's Creed, going from Assassin's Creed 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. They were all incredibly different games. And yeah, I think like creativity and innovation and them taking risks and them doing different stuff is always a good thing. And it's like, I understand at its heart the idea that there's an essence to some games that you want it to be the same. You know, if they released a Call of Duty that wasn't 60 frames a second on console, I would argue that wouldn't feel like a Call of Duty game to me. That wouldn't have the thing about Call of Duty that I love about it if it didn't have 60 frames a second on console. If they made a game that looked spectacular but it ran really slowly, that wouldn't feel right to me. But taking loadouts out of Warzone, it's like, of course it would still be Warzone. Like, well, it would still feel just like Warzone. It would just feel like the bit of Warzone before you get a loadout, which to me is the more exciting bit of Warzone. Like, but anyway, we'll talk about that tomorrow probably. I might put that as the topic tomorrow, so we can have it as the main thing that we talk about tomorrow. I think that'd be more interesting. Just going to keep up with a bit of chat because I don't want to move on and leave behind all of this bits of chat. So, Afas said, I'm amazed the hacker hunters haven't been sued. Yeah, it's definitely like, it's one of those things that I imagine it will happen. Like, as soon as you've got someone saying, like, someone's doing something that is defamation and it's, libel because they're making videos with things that aren't true about other people that could harm their reputation. It seems like a fairly clear-cut thing. And I don't think the people like Call of Shame and Bad Boy Beeman are smart enough to be like, oh, it could be that, or alleged. I don't think they use that kind of language. I think they put stuff on their thumbnails as like 100% cheating, like kind of things. You just need a streamer who's big enough and has the financial resources to be willing to take them to court. Because obviously taking people to court is an expensive thing and it takes up a lot of time. But I'm sure it will happen at some point. And it'll be interesting when it does. It'll be interesting to see, like, I imagine that would just be the end of a lot of that hacker hunting thing, because as soon as someone sees someone getting sued for, tens of thousands of dollars or whatever, that would be the end of it. But we'll see. I don't really understand why they haven't sued yet at all. And then Afas carried on, although Nadia massively capitalized on the insane toxicity directed towards her. Oh yeah, like that Nadia person is like a genius. Like the way she handled all of that stuff and turned it into something that got her huge amounts of engagement and money was just really clever. It was just really good. And, it made people like me, who wouldn't have ever probably watched Nadia in the first place, have respect for her and know who she is and care about who she is. Which I just wouldn't have if it wasn't for all of those hacking allegations, because I was just a bit like, these hacking allegations are so dumb. I feel sorry for the person who's doing it. I'll check out who they are. I'll support them. And it's like, I wouldn't have if it wasn't for those allegations and the way that she dealt with them. I don't know, like, it's weird that, like, I mean, it's not weird. You can tell why there was all of the focus on her rather than anyone else. But I couldn't tell you one other person who I know has been accused of cheating in the same way that Nadia has. Maybe Symphony? Maybe? I mean, I've myself looked at Symphony gameplay clips and been sort of like, whoa, he's doing things that seem super weird. But, I've kind of got to the point where I just realized, I can watch people who I know aren't cheating. I can watch Tactical Brit and Broken Machine playing and Jaff and be like, I've got no idea how they're doing the things they're doing. I know they're not cheating, but I also have no idea how they're pulling off the shots that they're doing. I was watching Jaff yesterday after I finished the podcast. I was watching him stream for a little bit, and he was like zooming in and shooting people with an assault rifle who I literally couldn't see. I had no idea there was anyone there, and he was just like immediately being like, oh yeah, bada 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 bada, and downing them. And I was just like, oh my god, like these people have much better eyesight than I do. I just couldn't do it. And there's always those things whenever you watch the people who are accused of cheating and stuff like that. Call of Duty is one of those games where you have, as a spectator or in a kill cam, you have so little information about what the other person knew. Like even simple things that, we always used to see in Warzone 1, where sometimes we would see someone from quite a long way away and not engage them, and we'd see that they ran into a building. And it's like, oh, okay, so now we know that they're in this building. We can like group up around the building, and then maybe one person on our team will shout out like, oh, he's up in that window. And then someone inside the building knows exactly where that is and can just walk around the corner and shoot them straight away, or shoot them through a wall or something. And it's kind of, as on the receiving end of that, it can feel like, how could that player possibly know where I was? How could that player have possibly reacted that fast? And it's like, it's because they probably had more information than you're aware. They could have been watching you before. They could have teammates calling stuff out. There's like a million different things within Call of Duty that can give you extra information that when you use, it just looks a bit like cheating. And there's always those times where occasionally you'll pull off a shot and it will kill someone without you really expecting it to. I've had a couple of times where I've shot at one person and someone else has just happened to like drive past and I've killed that person by mistake. And it's like, oh my god, that like looked a lot from that person's perspective. I wasn't aiming at them at all. Then I suddenly headshot them. That looks like I'm cheating. It's very, it's rare that happens, but when you think there's like 1 million people playing this every month or however many people playing, it's going to happen. Like those sort of crazy 1 in a million situations are going to happen all the time. And if loads of people have access to recording and stuff like that, you're going to see so many weird clips. It's like the aim assist conversation, where people put up those clips of aim assist being crazy and like seeming like it's locked onto someone. And it's like, in reality, what's happening is it's just like loads of things aligning at once to make it so it's the perfect situation where aim assist helps you. And you don't see the millions of clips where aim assist didn't help someone, where it didn't follow the person right, where it didn't keep up with them, because, you know, no, who's going to make a clip of that? So then people get this like warped perspective of what aim assist really does and what it is, because they see like the 1 in a million times where it absolutely like completely solved everything for you and it did everything for you, which just, you know, in normal gameplay doesn't happen. It's not something you can rely on. Anyway, I'm going massively off topic. Alex Ford said, my favorite part. Oh, sorry. Alex said, Doug was right. He said, Jaff said, Call of Shame needs to go. Yeah, Jaff, they definitely do. Alex Ford said, my favorite part is building guns and using them in Warzone. It's not that deep. Loadouts are the main pool. The easiest way to look at this, Alex Ford, is to say, it's the main pool for you. That's it. Problem solved. Like, for you, you like building guns and taking them into Warzone. Brilliant. I'm very happy for you. It's not like me saying that loadouts should go is ever going to change what they do. Like, I don't believe they're ever going to take loadouts out. I'm just saying I would prefer it if they did. You can be someone who enjoys loadouts. That's absolutely fine. There's no problem with that. I personally just think loadouts make the game worse. I think loadouts have a really damaging influence on the game because they make it so every fight ends up being kind of the same. You know, people using meta weapons, people being able to massively control the amount of recoil a gun has, put massive magazines on things, put crazy scopes on things, making it so people can build guns that are really good at any range. They can use assault rifles that they can take people out like 200 meters away. And it means that every fight ends up being kind of the same. In a Battle Royale game, in Warzone, I quite like the bit at the beginning where everyone drops in and everyone tries to find a gun and you have some interesting fights where you're making do with the guns you've got, a lot of which don't have brilliant scopes on, or they have really bad recoil control, or they've got tiny magazines or long reload times or things like that. And you're having to think about those things and think about how to deal with them and mitigate them. I find those fights more interesting rather than when 5 minutes into the game, everyone's got their loadouts and you're just like seeing like, okay, there's someone over there, brr, they're dead. Okay, there's someone over there, brr, they're dead. Oh, I'm dead because someone saw me. It just becomes really tedious to me. Like all the fights end up becoming super samey, and that's not a lot of fun to me. But if your thing is tinkering with Gunsmith and having a good time, that's fine. I would disagree with the next thing you said, where you said before Warzone fell off, J-God and True Game Data, Who's Immortal, used to pull in hundreds of thousands of views on loadouts or weapon videos. That doesn't mean those people liked there being loadouts. That means that people felt that they had to watch those videos in order to be competitive in the game. I used to watch those videos. It didn't mean I like loadouts. It just meant that when I went to play Battle Royale, because I don't want to be the weak link on my team, I would watch one of those videos or read one of those articles to be like, okay, what gun do I need to use? And it wasn't like I wasn't engaging with Gunsmith at all. I wasn't having fun with Gunsmith. All I was doing was loading up one of those videos, seeing what J-God said was the best assault rifle to use and copying that. I mean, now I sort of stopped doing that because I got bored of doing it. Now I just like, if I'm hopping on with like Jaff and Tactical Brit and Broken, I'll just ask them what to use and they'll tell me a build and I'll use that. I'm not engaging with the Gunsmith system at all. I'm literally just copying what somebody else said is good and using that. And it makes the game tedious and it doesn't add anything fun to me for the game, which just sucks. Nuclear Apple said, don't like how everything still has rule of free. Collect free items. Oh, yeah, why not? We'll get onto that in a second. We'll talk about it. Alex said, be cool if they had a permanent game mode for people who enjoy fighting with ground loot. They could put the AI in there too. Win-win. Yeah, like, I think it would be cool if they had like a Battle Royale Classic mode, which I think they've had as a limited time mode before. But if they had like Warzone 2 as kind of, it was meant to be originally, so they had AI on the map, they didn't have loadouts, or it was super expensive to buy your loadout guns, but they still had all of the Battle Royale mechanics, because, you know, that's the thing that DMZ's missing, is the Battle Royale side of it. You know, the tension of the circles coming and stuff. That would be super cool, but I don't think they'll ever have a million different modes or anything like that. You love Jaff, he's a real one. Yeah, Jaff's great. So PUBG. But the problem, Alexandru, like I've said a million times about this, is that PUBG doesn't feel anything like Call of Duty. PUBG doesn't feel at all like Call of Duty to play. You know, Call of Duty, the shooting, the moving around, all of that stuff is so like fluid and fast. I remember distinctly, I used to play loads of PUBG, like absolute tons of it. Because I sort of went from, I used to play a lot of Arma 2, and then I played a lot of DayZ, and then I sort of moved on to PUBG, sort of following through all of that stuff. And you kind of got used to the mechanics of it and the way it felt, but it always felt clunky to me. It always felt awkward and a bit slow, and just like, sometimes it was kind of fun, you know, like pulling off a good headshot in there or something was really satisfying. But it was a very slow feeling game and very, very, very clunky. And then when Blackout came out, like the first Call of Duty Battle Royale, it was just like, that was the big revelation. Like that was the big thing that made it feel different to everything else, was like, oh my God, this feels so good to play. Like you can move around quickly, you can shoot people, and it feels like super responsive, super active. You know, it's not realistic or anything like that, but it feels like Call of Duty, you know, a game series I've been playing for like 15, 20 years. And that was the thing that made it feel special. And it's like, and then going into Warzone, it was like that, but then you also had contracts. You also had like the whole gulag and buyback system, which was awesome. And it's like, all of that stuff was great. And like, you also did have loadouts. I thought that was the thing that made it a bit worse, but the other stuff is the stuff that made it good. It feels like Call of Duty. The gulag's a really cool idea. The contracts are really cool, you know, because they give you something to do in the game that's not just trying to find other players. It was really cool. I enjoyed it a lot. But yeah, loadouts have never been a part of that. And I just find, I really hate that argument where I've seen it so many times, people being like, oh, we'll just go play PUBG then. And it's like, but PUBG's nothing like Warzone. Like, it just doesn't feel anything like Warzone. That's like saying, like, oh, go play Fortnite then. That doesn't have loadouts. It's like, but Fortnite doesn't feel like Warzone. It's a different feel to the game. And that to me is much more important. You think most weapons in Warzone are good, you just have to change your game style a bit. Yeah, but some games are better. That's why there's a meta. Like, some guns are just incredibly good and versatile. You know, like an ISO Hemlock is going to be really good at nearly every range, and you can make it so you don't have to really worry about controlling recoil. And, you know, and like I said, you don't have to worry about range, and you can have a large magazine in there. You've got a gun that's like, now why would you use anything else that's a bit worse? Like, why would you bother? It just seems like you're just putting yourself at a disadvantage. And the whole benefit of having just ground loot weapons is that the developers can make an interesting pool of ground loot that can rotate to keep things fresh, keep changing things so people don't always use the same guns. But also they can make it so like, oh, okay, we're going to put assault rifles in there, but maybe this assault rifle just has iron sights, so it's kind of hard to take on those long range engagements. Or this assault rifle only has like a 15 round mag, so it's going to be hard if you're taking on more than one player. Or this assault rifle has a really slow fire rate, so it's not really good if you're up close with someone, or if you miss any of your shots. Like, they can build in those like significant downsides into the guns. Whereas Gunsmith has kind of eliminated that, where just because there's so many guns, so many attachments, so much tuning, people are always going to find a way of making a gun basically like, you know, not perfect, but pretty close to perfect. Something that's insanely easy to use. And that's, like, to me, that's the thing that's made Warzone a lot more boring. Like, that's the worst thing about it. It just has to be polished. Yeah, I mean, you just have to polish, like, what's that, 55 different guns with, like, hundreds of attachments and tuning settings. Just make all of those equal. Like, how hard could that be? I mean, come on. You know what we're talking about here. Meta's ruined a lot of games. Yeah, definitely. It ruined a lot of, like World of Warcraft for me. The idea that, you know, you have all of these amazing talent point trees and all of that sort of stuff, all of these different spells, and then people say, oh yeah, but this is the rotation you have to use. This is the talent setup you have to use. Path of Exile's the same. Yeah, Diablo's been like... Diablo got a bit better in Diablo 3. I think they did a pretty good job of making different ways of building stuff viable. But, like, in anything, like, where it's got really, really hard PvE content or any PvP content, there's always going to be, like, a way of making it so there is a best way of doing it. And even if you just had ground loot, there would be guns that people would say, right, this week, this is the best gun to use at this range. But the point is that then the developers can make that gun not very good in some way. They can give it some kind of big problem where it's like, okay, but actually maybe in this situation, this gun would be better. The problem with the loadouts is that you can just end up with a loadout that works for basically every situation. You know, right now, people can have an assault rifle and an SMG, and they can take engagements at basically any range without worrying about it. Like, they're fine. their two guns will cover absolutely everything, which I never think is good. It's like, why would you bother taking in a marksman rifle? Why would you bother taking in a battle rifle? Like, those entire collections of guns seem pretty much pointless, because it's like you could do it better with an assault rifle. So it just seems silly. So anyway, let's get on to the main topic of today, because I've done this thing again where I've been talking about other topics for like 20 minutes, but we might circle back to loadouts thing tomorrow. I think that might be a fun thing to talk about tomorrow. So the main thing I want to talk about are what are the worst things in gaming. Let's leave Call of Duty behind a little bit and think about what are the very worst things in gaming. I've got a bit of a list. I'd be intrigued to hear yours, so put them in chat. What are the things that you hate in gaming? But let's get started. So the first one, let's start with some of the classics, is the escort quest. And the escort quest, I think, is something that when I started thinking about this, I was thinking, no one's ever done it well. Why do people still do it? Like, it's the thing that put me off Resident Evil 4 Remaster, is remembering how much of it you have to spend babysitting Ashley. Like, wandering around environments and being like, oh, okay, I need to put Ashley in this cupboard, or I need to put her in this bin, or I need to put her in this corner, so then I can take out all the enemies, and I need to keeping an eye on her to make sure no one's gone to grab her. And it just it never feels fun. It never feels engaging. To me, like, the best example of this, and the one I actually used for the thumbnail for this podcast, is the mission control in GoldenEye. For anyone who's old like me and remembers playing GoldenEye, the single-player campaign of it, there's a mission quite near the end. I think it's like the 10th mission or something like that. And that is control, where you need to take Natalia through a base. And I think you start off in jungle, you take her through jungle, and then you take her to the base. And she has to hack a load of computers. And while she's hacking the computers, you just have to protect her against like waves of enemies. Now, the problem is that Natalia moves incredibly slowly, and all of the computers she's hacking can explode. And if they explode, then it'll kill her, because that's just how explosions work in GoldenEye. And the enemies will sometimes like just shoot wildly and happen to hit the computers and kill her. And it feels like a lot of it's kind of out of your control. You know, you essentially have to learn where the enemies spawn and take them out before they have a chance. And I feel like with escort quests, that's always been kind of the way I've done it, is essentially using exploits, like essentially finding the places where enemies will spawn and just making sure at no point do they ever have a chance to touch the person that we're escorting, which never feels a lot of fun, especially when it just requires trial and error. And I never like it very much in games where the games are meant to be immersive, but you're just engaging with the game side of it. You're just trying to be like, okay, that is a spawner. Enemies will spawn at 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 1 minute. I need to make sure that I've got a grenade there ready, or I need to make sure I've got my gun on there. Like, that side of stuff I never really like. And I was thinking about this, thinking like, oh, escorts have never been done well. But then I was like, actually, they have. Like, there have been escort quests that have worked well. Like, Gears of War is quite a good example, where sometimes in Gears of War, I don't know which ones, they all sort of merge into one for me. There's been somewhere when you're playing in co-op, one half the team will go off on one route, and one team will go off on the other route, and then you have to cover each other. So you're escorting another player. And that I quite enjoy. Or like missions where you have you're up top on a rooftop with a sniper rifle. Perfect Dark Zero did this, where one person's on the rooftops with a sniper rifle and the other person has to move around on the floor and you're covering them. That's cool. The Modern Warfare 2 mission where the Spec Ops thing, where one person's in an AC-130 and the other person's running around on the ground. That's very cool. And I think that all comes down to the competency of the other person. That, like, if the other person, you're helping them and you're helping to protect them, but they're actually capable of doing stuff themselves, then it becomes a lot more interesting. Then it becomes a lot more fun. But when you're trying to escort someone who is slow, someone who is helpless, Assassin's Creed always does that really annoying thing. Oh, it doesn't now, but it used to do that really annoying thing of you'd be escorting someone who's just so much slower than you. And it's like you're having to wait around for them to catch up. And that's so painful. Even if there's no combat involved, you're just like walking somewhere and you have to walk at the same speed as the AI. That's so annoying. In the more recent Assassin's Creed games, they do a really cool thing where basically the AI will always travel at the same speed as you. So if you're on horseback, they'll get on a horse. If you're running, they'll run. Even if it doesn't really make sense because you're like holding a conversation while sprinting down a road. It's still like, it just makes the gameplay feel much more interesting. But what I'd like to see with this, like my proposed fix to it, which obviously is much easier said than done, is even if you have to have an escort quest with AI, wouldn't it be cool if the AI was actually like impressive? If the AI was doing cool stuff and like, yeah, you have to like you're going along with them, you're helping them. But like say with Resident Evil 4, what about if Ashley actually hid in sensible places herself and like called things out to you and helped you in that way? You know, what if she had some kind of initiative and would be like, oh, okay, this is pretty bad. I'm going to go hide over here. So you don't have to tell her to do it because, you know, that's just stupid. Or if you're escorting someone and they have a decent, you know, they are fighting themselves. Like I'm imagining something like, imagine if there was an X-Men game where you were escorting Nightcrawler and he was doing all the bamfing and teleporting and taking out enemies and stuff like that. And you're taking out the enemies that he couldn't. You know, maybe there's some armored enemies that he just doesn't have the strength to deal with. So you're taking out them while he's taking out all of like the snipers and the people far away. That would be awesome. Stuff like that would be really fun, but it just doesn't seem to happen very much in games. Again, probably because it's like super annoying. Then the second one, again, going with the classics, then I'm going to get onto my more personal ones. Second one is underwater levels. This is one that I know lots of people hate. You know, in the Mario games, underwater levels are really annoying. Sonic, the underwater levels are some of the most stressful things I've ever experienced in gaming. You know, that sound effect where it's like, and it's like that. I mean, I'm sure lots of you, your heart rate just rose just listening to that. It's just horrific. And it's like the whole problem of underwater levels is that it's, you know, it's like building in, or at least not with Mario, but with games like Sonic and some other games, it's building in a sort of problem of, okay, you've now got limited oxygen. You now have to do everything with a time limit. And I hate that. I hate that in games when I've got a time limit to do something. It just causes me so much stress. There's very few times when I enjoy something with a time limit. Like, there's very few times where I'm like, oh, I'm glad this game had a time limit. There's some things where it works, like Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. That's a game where you work with a friend to defuse a bomb. That works really well. Very much enjoy that. But I can't think of many other times where games have put a time limit on the screen, whether it's an oxygen meter and you know, like whether you're in space, whether you're underwater, or whatever it is. And then I've been like, oh yeah, this is more fun. This is like a more entertaining game because of that time limit. It just sucks. And underwater also, you know, generally it means that your movement is a little bit awkward, a little bit clunky. There's not many games that have managed to do swimming like with a camera and movement and everything like that and made it work well. It's very rare. It was quite nice when I was playing Jedi Survivor and like when I replayed Jedi Fallen Order that you jump in the water and it's like, oh, you've got a rebreather, so you can just stay underwater for as long as you want now. And it's like, oh, okay, so now I can sort of get to grips with the mechanics and see like this whole other world that's underwater and, you know, engage with different types of enemies and stuff like that. Like, that's a fun idea because it's just like the movement's different. But as soon as you add that oxygen meter on as top of it, I just hate it. And in Mario, it's like, it was always the movement and the jumping and everything in Mario was super fun and super like tightly controlled and really good. And then it puts you in water and you're drifting about all over the place. It's like, this isn't fun. This isn't what I enjoyed. I get that they're doing it for some kind of variety. You know, it's an easy way to make a level feel very different, but it's like just worse. It's just a worse version of the level. Now, my next one, I'm going to rattle through some of these because I'm going quickly. This is one that's a bit more unique to me, but I realized it when I was playing Riders Republic yesterday. And that's when some games, some of you, I'm sure most of you know, when streamers are playing games, they have to worry about the music, like whether the music's been cleared for streaming. Because sometimes games will use licensed music where the contract means that they're allowed to use it in a game, but they're not allowed to use it for like YouTube videos and Twitch streams and stuff like that. And that means people who are playing the game also aren't allowed to use it for those things. So if, you know, the people who hold the license to it, normally a record label, detect it on YouTube, they'll send a DMCA and get your video taken down or demonetized or whatever. You know, worse comes to worse, you get like strikes and you get your channel removed, which would suck. So some games have been really good over the last sort of 10 years or so and started doing streamer mode where you just click a button in the audio options. It removes all of the licensed music, all the music that's going to get you in trouble. And then it can do one of two things. One thing that it can do is it replaces that music with generic music. So it's music that's maybe not as good, not as notable, but it kind of has the same mood. So, you know, if you're in a chase scene, it will still have some, you know, exciting music. It just won't be licensed music. If you're in a sad scene, it'll just be some sad music, but it won't be like a specific song. And that's really good. That works amazingly. Love it when games do that. Then you have games like Bloody Riders Republic, which I love in nearly every other way, but you turn streamer mode on, and what it does is removes all the music in the game. So now you're just going down, doing all the races in absolute silence, which just sucks. It just really sort of kills the mood of it. And there's loads of racing games that do this. It's really annoying. Call of Duty has a kind of more annoying thing where they have war tracks, which you can put on in the vehicles, which have a lot of licensed music in them. And for whatever and I've had videos demonetized because of them. And for whatever reason, sometimes in the options, there's a button that says disable war tracks, and it doesn't work. It doesn't do anything. You can turn that on or off if you want, and still, when you've got a friend driving a vehicle and they've got war tracks on, it will just start playing the music. So I have to kind of tell my friends to turn war tracks off, or I have to drive all the time. If you see in Warzone, you see me being the one to drive nearly all the time. It's normally because everyone else has war tracks on. And, you know, I don't know how hard it would be for them just to put something in the audio settings that says, like, hey, only play war tracks if they're stream safe. You know, have it so when you're setting your war tracks, be like, only music that doesn't need a license. That would be absolutely amazing, but they don't do it, and it's very, very annoying. Then the next one, sticking with racing games, because racing games annoy me. And then at the end of this, once I've gone through my little list, I'm going to go through all the ones in chat and chat about them. Racing games with achievements or requirements for winning every race. This is something that super annoys me. Need for Speed games are normally quite bad for this. Forza games are really bad for this, where they have some kind of challenge, or even worse, some kind of requirement where you can't progress the story without it, where you have to win every race. Because what that does is it means I put the difficulty on slightly lower than it should be. So, you know, a lot of the time in racing games, you know, most of you will know, anyone who plays a lot of racing games, especially arcade racing games, will know, normal difficulty is normally way too easy. Like, they just make it so you will end up, like, minutes ahead of the person in second. So you always end up putting it onto a slightly harder difficulty. But at some point, you're going to put it on a difficulty where sometimes you don't win, where the competition is now fair, and sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. It's a struggle you have to try. But if you have some kind of achievement or some kind of requirement to win every race, now you're having to restart races because you didn't win. You're having to do the same race over and over again. Or, you know, some games have like the replay thing where you take a bad corner and you're like, well, better reset that because that sucks. You know, that didn't go very well. And that's just so unbelievably irritating. Like, I really hate that in games. I want in racing games to be able to be in that midfield. And if I win a race, for that to be a big deal. Like, I want that to be exciting, and I want there to be the tension of I could lose, but it's okay, I can carry on, because maybe in the next race I'll be able to do better. Like, I'm playing Formula 1 2022 at the moment. I've been playing quite a lot of that off stream. And that I really enjoy being in the midfield. I play in the Haas team, so I'm always in the midfield. If I get into the points, I'm doing well. And it means there's always cars ahead of me, there's always cars behind me. I'm always overtaking or getting overtaken, worrying about when to do pit stops and stuff. If you put it on a mode where you're basically Max Verstappen and you're 30 seconds ahead of everyone else, so you could literally spin out or like do an extra pit stop, and it wouldn't change the order, you'd still be in first. That's just boring. Like, I just find that very tedious. So I'd like it in more racing games if they did more things where just like you're rewarded just for doing like better than expected. You know, like I think one of the newest Need for Speed games did a thing that I quite liked, where it's like when you go into a race, it says where it thinks you'll come based on the speed of your car. It'll say like, okay, you're in this car, we think you'll come fourth. And if you do better than fourth, you get extra rewards. And if you get fourth, it's fine. Like, the game still progresses on, you're still making progression, stuff like that. And it's like, that's better. I think that's a better way of doing it. Like, racing is more interesting if you're not in first. Like, being in first is quite boring. If you don't have to like fight for it. I can't stand it when I play a new racing game and like literally it's like a 5-lap race, and by halfway around the first lap I'm in first and the enemy's already trailing off, and it's like, oh, this is rubbish. But then I put the difficulty up by 1 notch, and then it's like, oh, now I'm not winning the race and I have to keep on replaying the same race again and again and again until I do it perfectly. Otherwise I can't progress. You know, I can't unlock the next car part, or I can't unlock the next race. And it's like, I hate games like that. I really can't stand that kind of thing. It very much annoys me. And then sticking with racing games, I've got 2 more things for racing games. One of them is online racing games where it's tough to just set up a tournament of private racing races. I remember, like, back in the days of playing Mario Kart, one of the really cool things about it was you'd be playing split screen and you'd go onto the versus bit and it'd say, do you want to do a versus Grand Prix? And it'll give you 4 races, you get points for every race, and you just move through it. It's really simple, lots and lots of fun. Then you get games that are like more recent games like Forza Horizon and the Need for Speed, all of these open world racing games. And it's like, oh, you want to do a race, do you, with your friends? So first of all, invite them into your lobby. And now you're all going to drive to the start point of the race. And then when you're at that start point, then we'll show you the track of it. Then you can do that race and you'll go through the race. And then when you get to the end, then you've all got to decide what to do and you've got to drive to another start point. And it's like, all of that's really tedious. Like, all of that takes a long time. Like, it just adds so much faff to it, where really all I want to do is like race. And that's it. And then, like, coupled with that, when you get into those racing things with these open world racing games that all seem to insist on being RPGs, where you're unlocking new parts or you're raising money to improve your car and stuff like that, when they have online races and you use custom cars by default, Forza does this a lot, where it's like, hey, we're going to say you go into quick match mode, and you get put into a race, and it'll be like, okay, this is a B-class off-road. And it's like, you'd better hope you've got a B-class off-road car that is at the maximum rating for B. Otherwise, you're not going to have a chance against any of these people. And the game will normally provide you with a car that's not as good as all of the custom cars that everyone else has. And God, I hate that. I used to really enjoy playing GTA 5 online, the GTA Online races, where you could, when you made a public lobby, you could set a thing saying, don't allow custom cars. And it's like, that meant everyone had the same cars, everyone had the same chance. It didn't matter how much money you'd spent on your cars. It didn't matter how much you'd like leveled up your driving or anything like that. Just everyone had the same ability, the same car, on the same track. You could have some fun races. And again, you could do Grand Prix and things like that. And it was really cool. I just wish every racing game made it simple. So, like, if you've been playing a game for hundreds of hours and then you've got a friend who's like, hey, like, I want to check out this racing game, you can be like, sure, I'll invite you into a race, and then you're made equal. You're put in the same car, on the same track, and you just have a go at it. And you don't have to faff, you don't have to get them to drive around there. They don't have to unlock a bunch of cars first. Like, it just really annoys me. It really sort of kills the joy of racing games. Right, let's hear some of yours. Let's hear some of the things that you think are annoying or really, really good about games in general. So Nuclear Apple said he doesn't like how everything still has a rule of 3. This is something that, like, games always used to have, where, like, you know, if you have to pick up an item, you're going to have to pick up 3 items. You know, Zelda, it'd be like, you know, Zelda Ocarina of Time. It's like, okay, you've got to go to the fireplace and the forest place and the water place. And then if you have to fight a boss, it'll be like, if you have to do something quite complicated to hit the boss, you better believe you're going to be doing that 3 times in order to kill it. Yeah, it gets super tedious. It just does feel like it's very sort of cliched at this point, where it's always, you've got to do the same thing 3 times. And I've always had the problem with gaming that I know they want to pad games out because people, for some reason, hate games that are short. I love games that are short. Like when Order 1886 came out and everyone complained that, like, oh yeah, it's like super polished, it looks beautiful, the gameplay's fun, but it's only 4 hours long. And it's like, I kind of get that complaint, but I really enjoyed having a super polished 4-hour game. Like, that was awesome. That was really good. But when you have games that are just like, okay, you've done this thing that, you know, you worked out, well done, now do it 2 more times. It's like, what's the point? It's like back when I was a teacher. I was a secondary school teacher, 13 years. And I hardly ever sat homework. You know, the only time I'd ever really set homework is when it was something where, like, we'd run out of time in the lesson and I was like, okay, can you finish this off? Or if it was something that would have been tedious to do in a lesson, like, oh, you need to do something that's, you know, research or write an essay that's going to take you half an hour. I don't really want to spend half an hour of the lesson with you doing that. So can you do that at home instead? But when you sometimes would get teachers who would set homework where it's like, okay, you've done this in a lesson. Well done. You've done it well. You've learned how to do it. Now do it 5 more times at home. And it's like, why? They already showed you that they know how to do it. If you want to check that they can do it next time, do it again in another lesson. If they can't do it, if they couldn't do it in your lesson, they're not going to be able to do it at home. And if they could do it in the lesson, why do they need to do it again? It just feels like a very sort of annoying way of doing repetition and just padding stuff out and wasting people's time. And I think there's quite a lot of games that do just waste your time. It's like, hey, you've done this thing, really cool. Now do it again and again. Like, we've hit that in Redfall that me and Cobb have just been playing through the sort of second half of it now. And there's loads of times where it's like, oh, okay, to unlock this boss, to unlock the next story mission, you need to go do 3 more safe houses. And it's like, but we've done a bunch of safe houses. I don't want to do any more safe houses. Like, they're exactly the same. The missions are always exactly the same. I don't want to keep on doing them. But it's like, nope, do it again, do it again, do it again. And I find that very, very tedious. What other things have people said? Just trying to skip the Call of Duty type bits to get to other things. I mean, what House was saying about the meta, I think that doesn't just apply to Call of Duty. Like I was saying, World of Warcraft, Path of Exile, there's so many games where if you have a big like skill tree or talent tree, and then there's objectively a best way to put those things in, you now don't have a skill tree. You've just created some busy work for someone. Like, you know, similarly with racing games, if you've got like a million different engine parts, but like one of them's better, then it's like, that's the right one. Like, why would you have all of the others? Why would you bother with all of the others? I think it's much more interesting when games give you choices where there's a downside, like a significant downside. One of the things that I really loved about Modern Warfare 2 when it first launched was when people were playing the beta, and lots of people started coming out and being like, maybe it's better not to have any attachments on your guns, because so many of the attachments in Modern Warfare 2 had severe downsides. You know, it's like, okay, you can put this barrel on that will give you a bit of extra range, but now the recoil's terrible. Or you can have this magazine that's like a bigger magazine, but now the reload time is terrible. And stuff like that. Or, you know, you put a scope on, it's going to make your ADS time much worse. And it's like, I really like that. I like the idea that having a gun with no attachments was in some cases the best way to do it. Or you might not want to have 5 attachments. You might just want to pick like, okay, I really need a scope on this, so I'm going to take the hit to ADS time and put that on. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a really cool way of balancing it. And I think in all games, that's a good way of doing stuff where it's like, if you have some customization of skills or whatever, there needs to be a pro and a con to it. So there's a, you know, reasonable argument to not taking them. And then, like, you know, in Call of Duty, they've gone down a path of being like, oh no, we want to reduce the downsides to attachments. So now basically everybody runs 5 attachments on all their guns, because it's like, why wouldn't you? You know, there is a laser that just makes ADS time better and doesn't have a downside. Why wouldn't you have the biggest magazine size if it doesn't affect your reload time or anything like that? Why wouldn't you put a suppressor on if it's not affecting your damage? It's just making like the range better. It's just like, you know, I find that sort of stuff very tedious. It makes it very boring. Affa says, I think treasure hunts being used to extend playtime is a trend you'd like to see end. Yeah, like the collectibles thing is really interesting. Some games do collectibles really well. Like BioShock did a really good job of collectibles, where it's like all of the collectibles give you some extra information, a little bit of backstory for the area that you're in. So, you know, you'll be fighting through a particular area of Rapture, and you will find voice logs and stuff that will tell you a story of somebody who lived in that area or someone who died in that area or whatever. And I find that really interesting. When you've got stuff, you know, like Assassin's Creed, hey, go find 100 flags. They're just in random places around the world. It's like, really? That's quite tedious. That's quite boring. Some games can do it right. Like, you know, Crackdown's agility orbs, for some reason, were really fun in Crackdown 1, really terrible in Crackdown 3. Who knows what the difference was, but for some reason it worked in Crackdown 1, it didn't work in Crackdown 3. And, you know, some games use collectibles to encourage you to go to places where you maybe wouldn't otherwise go, and that can be interesting. I don't like it, like, I was talking about this when I was playing Jedi Survivor, that I don't like it that if I feel like I'm looking for collectibles, I'm not really engaging with the game, especially in action-adventure games like Jedi Survivor, where it's like, I'm constantly thinking, oh, that's the way the game wants me to go, so I need to go this other direction first, because then there might be a secret, there might be a collectible over there. And then you go that way, and then you find that's actually the way the game wanted you to go. It's like, oh no, now I need to go back and backtrack and go the other way, because that's the way where there might be a collectible secret. And, you know, Jedi Survivor does a really annoying thing where 90% of the collectibles are cosmetics and don't matter. You know, you'll find a beard or something. But then every now and then, it'll be something that gives you an extra stim shot, which massively changes the game, or an extra you know, a more force ability or something like that, like something that really matters. And it's like, that's very frustrating, because now all the time I'm playing the game, I'm constantly checking places. Uncharted is pretty good for like not having much of that. Like Uncharted, you're immersed, you're focused on where you're meant to be going, and you do that. And like, I never think about collectibles in Uncharted. I don't even know if there are collectibles in Uncharted, but like, you're just doing that, and I'm not constantly having to second guess, being like, oh, okay, I know I have to go here to save someone, but I'm just going to go around this corner because there might be a shiny trinket to pick up. It's like, that stuff's tedious. I don't like that stuff at all. It's very annoying. And again, like some games, if the point of the game is exploring the environments, then it's fine. Like Elden Ring, fine to have loads of different things to find where, wherever you go, you're going to find something interesting. That's cool. Like, exploring is the point of it. But if you've got a game with like a narrative that's trying to push you through an area, I really don't want to have to be constantly stopping to like think, oh, but do I need to climb on that box? Because then I could make that jump. And if I get over there, there might be something there. That's kind of gets annoying. Texas P8 said, the worst thing in gaming is other gamers and game communities, by which I mean some elements of those things. Like people in life, really, except possibly easy to avoid. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing of like online gaming communities is like it ebbs and flows. Sometimes it seems worse than others. And I think it's probably just to do with how deep I am in a certain gaming community. Like I was really surprised having that sort of little interaction with the modern Warzone community there. That like, God, a lot of these Twitter comments are a lot more aggressive and badly written and a lot more offensive than the ones I normally get on Twitter. And it's like, oh, because I've stepped into a different community, a community where these sort of things are normal. In my normal tweets, if someone was being like that to me, I'd just block them. I'd just be like, what the hell? Why would you talk to a stranger like that? That's so rude. But, when you get into some communities, that's the kind of norm. And same with the streams. You see in our streams, they're like, when I'm streaming, people are pretty respectful in chat. Like, people are pretty normal. And then you go to watch someone else's streams, you go watch Dr. Disrespect, and there'll just be people like spamming stuff and being super offensive. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to be a part of that. So I've sort of found ways to kind of curate my own gaming communities and try to, push away. And it means that my community is obviously smaller than it would be otherwise because we sort of gatekeep a little bit and block people out. But it also means that I'm not hating all the time. Like back when I used to have like 2,000 people in the Discord, and I just hated it. I just hated engaging with a lot of those people. And so I ended up just kicking everyone and then going back to having like 10 people on the Discord who I actually wanted to talk to. That was quite sort of a big thing. But yeah, it is very difficult, like, when you go into a game and you have to engage with some side of that. But thankfully, it doesn't happen too much. Like, I've been kind of surprised with Call of Duty, with the proxy chat, that I've had probably more positive interactions on proxy chat than negative ones. Like, when I've ended up actually talking to someone in proxy chat, generally, they've been pretty sound. Generally, met lots of very funny people, lots of people who have been quite nice, lots of people who have been sort of, like, oh, GG, fair enough. Like, there's been a lot more positivity than I would have expected. The racist idiots and the homophobic idiots and all stuff like that seem to be a bit of the minority, but maybe that's to do with like the time I play, the region I play in. I don't know. I've heard there's a lot more racism on the US servers and stuff like that. So, and a lot of the time I'm playing against German people that I can't understand what they're saying. So maybe they are being horrible, but I just don't understand it. I don't know, but it's strange. Alexandru says, you think the price of games is exaggerated a lot and more games not having a trial option. Let's be honest, AAA games are not AAA games anymore. Completely disagree. I mean, I disagree with so much of what you say, Alexandru. I'm very sorry. Games are cheaper now than they ever have been. Well, not ever have been, but then they were. Like, people making a big deal of games like Redfall and Zelda being $70. It's like, I was talking a few days ago about how I remember when my parents bought me Starwing, which is Star Fox in the US, but for some reason in the UK they called it Starwing. And that was £70 on the Super Nintendo. That was a £70 game. And it used to be quite a lot of games were about that much money, £60, £70. That was pretty normal back then. And then for whatever reason, games started getting cheaper. I think it was when they moved from cartridge to CD, games got cheaper because CDs were just cheaper than cartridges, and that was seen as like, a way that the PlayStation could differentiate itself from Nintendo. Is like, hey, PlayStation games are cheaper because they're on CDs. And games ended up being like 30 quid for a while, and then they slowly crept up. But then when you look at the budgets of games, you've got some games now where the budgets are in hundreds of millions of dollars because they've got, thousands of people working on them all over the world. And you've got A-list celebrity voice actors and motion capture acting and stuff like that. You've got like live service games where people are having to work for years after a game comes out, constantly kind of in a state of crunch, like on Fortnite and stuff like that, to make new content. Because people used to, when you used to buy a game, you used to kind of get a game and you would accept that that was it. Sometimes you'd buy a game, it would be like a 10-hour, 15-hour long game, and that was it. And you knew you weren't getting any more. You knew you weren't going to get any more content to it or anything like that. You just kind of got it and you were either happy with it or you weren't. And you'd buy multiplayer games. You'd buy GoldenEye. GoldenEye, I imagine when it came out, was 50 or 60 quid. And GoldenEye came out and it had, a set number of guns, a set number of maps, it had a campaign, and it had multiplayer. And you knew that was it. Like, there was never going to be anything more added to GoldenEye. They were never going to add new maps. They were never going to add online. They were never going to add new characters or anything like that. You just had what you had on the game. And it was buggy. Like, there was plenty of bugs in GoldenEye. And it was just like, okay, this is just a part of the game. This is just a thing that happens in this game. You just live with it. Some things were unbalanced. You had Odd Job in the game, or you had guns like the Klob being completely terrible and guns like the RCP-90 being like insanely overpowered. And it was just like, oh, that's just the game. That's just how it is. Like, you just accepted it. And nowadays, like, you buy a game, and if anything's broken when it launches, you just expect it to get fixed at some point for free. Like, you expect them to release a patch for free to fix it. It would be crazy to think that they wouldn't. And then you often expect them to add new content at various times, especially for multiplayer games. You expect them to add new maps. You expect them to add new characters. A lot of the time, again, for free, on top of the things you played. It just seems crazy. Like, I feel like we get so much more value out of games than we used to. And games are just so much bigger than they used to be. Like, you look at something like Call of Duty. You remember, like, when the first Call of Duty came out, you had single player and multiplayer, and that was it. And then it's like, now you have Modern Warfare 2 comes out, and it's like, okay, yeah, you've got the single player campaign with, top tier CGI cutscenes and stuff like that, voice acting all the way through it, lots of difficulty modes, all of that stuff. Then you've got Spec Ops, then you've got the multiplayer stuff, then you've got raids as well. Then you've got, we're going to keep on adding new maps for free every month. We're going to add new weapons over time. We're going to add all of these challenges and stuff like that. You've got all of the camo grinds. All of that stuff is just like, it's just included in the game now. And still, people look at a game like Modern Warfare 2 and are like, man, they're really stingy with the content. There's not enough maps. There's not enough like guns. There's not enough operator skins or whatever. Like, they're still looking at that game and being like, yeah, there's just not enough to it. It's like rubbish. And then on top of that, you get stuff like Warzone and DMZ that's free to play. And you get insane amounts of content just for free if you don't want to buy the microtransactions, if you don't want to buy the cosmetics. I think games are way, way, way undervalued. I think the price of games has been much lower than it should be for a long while. That's probably a big part of the reason why when you've had game companies that haven't innovated so much, you look at like EA and Activision releasing very similar games that they know are successful year after year. I think a big part of that is because it's so hard to make money on games. It's so hard to make money back from games. Because if you're investing hundreds of millions of dollars into a game, bear in mind, when people look at it and they say, oh yeah, they're spending hundreds of millions, but then they're making billions. It's like a handful of games are making billions. What about the people who put hundreds of millions into a game and don't make that back, which happens a lot? There's a lot of games that pump a huge amount of money into it and then just fail. They just don't do well. They end up being forgotten about almost instantly. They don't sell well. They come out at the wrong time. You have games like Titanfall 2, which can be incredible AAA games and just not make money. Lawbreakers, really like high production values on Lawbreakers and ends up shutting down after a few weeks and not making anywhere near the money back that it would have been spent on it. So that kind of risk is built into the cost and stuff like that. And the more people are willing to pay for games, the more risk people are willing to take. More people are willing to spend on games. The more people are willing to make games that maybe aren't going to have quite as big of an audience. When you see like Square Enix saying that one of those Tomb Raider games had disappointing sales because it sold 1 million copies. Like, that's insane. Like a million copies was like disappointing to them. That just seems utterly crazy. Like if I put out a video and it had 1 million people watch it, and they're watching it for free, like I can't imagine being like, well, that was very disappointing. It's just bizarre. But yeah, I think games need to be more expensive because the alternative is like if you don't want games to get more expensive, the alternatives are either they monetize in other ways through advertising. Like the gambling-y type mechanics, the pay-to-win mechanics, like aggressively doing microtransactions and stuff like that, or they spend less making games. So, they have less people working on them, so less QA, less designers, less creative people, less, less time spent on the games maybe, because that's obviously the biggest thing when it comes to a game's budget is how long you're spending making it. If you have a game that would cost $100 million if you made it in 3 years, if you're making it in 4 years, it's probably going to cost $130 million because you've got to pay for all of those salaries for all those people. That's an extra $30 million you've got to try and get back in costs. So games would be released in a worse state. It would have less people working on it. So yeah, it's like you get a choice. Like, do you want them to spend a lot of money on games? Do you want super aggressive monetization within the game, or do you want to pay more for the games at the beginning? Like, it's one of those. Like, I don't see what an alternative would be. It's easy to say to people, well, they should just make AAA quality games for less money. And it's like, how? Like, how would they do that? And the annoying thing is, every now and then an exception comes out. You get something like Minecraft, where it's like Notch makes it by himself, and everyone's like, well, look at that, he can make Minecraft by himself. It's like, why can't everyone do that? And it's like, well, literally thousands of people are trying, but most of them fail, and a lot of them quit their jobs and everything to do it, and then end up bankrupt because it didn't work out. It's just like, you can't use survivorship bias to point out the few times when something like that worked. Anyway, going on to the next one. Nuclear Apple said the whole go to this location, oh, now it needs a key, go find the key, happens a lot of times for most doors in most games. That's something I've noticed more and more recently. Like, in recent games, there's so many times where it's like, you go somewhere, and then it's like, oh, you need this. And then you just have to go somewhere else to get the thing, then come back and do it. And there's a lot of backtracking involved. And nothing really interesting happens in that whole time that you're backtracking. And it feels like that happens loads in games at the moment. I completely agree. That's what I do. It even happens in films. You look at the new Guardians of the Galaxy film, and it's like, I enjoyed a lot of it, but like a lot of the plot, and a lot of the plot of, a lot of films is very much like, hey, let's go here to get this thing. And then they get there, and then it's like, hey, but now you need this thing, or like, now you need this person. Like, oh, okay, we'll go there. And then they go there, and it's like, hey, but speak to this person, you need this thing. And then they go there. And it's just like this long series of like fetch quests, essentially, where it's just a way of getting people to a location. Like, that's all that's happening. And that gets kind of tedious. Like, it just feels like it's kind of padding a little bit. AFA said this is more PC game specific, but hardware manufacturers getting so involved with development that the game experience is negatively impacted. People using their competitors' hardware. Yeah, I really hate that when you load up a game and it's like, hey, this is better with AMD, and they don't have DLSS and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, cool. Great, I don't have an AMD graphics card. I'm not going to buy an AMD graphics card for your one game and like swap out my NVIDIA thing. It's not simple like that. So I guess I'm just kind of screwed. And yeah, like, that sucks. It's like a more extreme version of, what Sony and Microsoft do, where Sony are like supposedly, doing deals saying like, hey, we're going to make sure this game doesn't come on Game Pass, or we're going to make sure, I think that apparently in the whole Activision Microsoft deal, there's been stuff come out where it's like, turns out that Sony have done deals where they've said like, hey, you can release your game on this other console, but it can't have any extra features. It can't have any it can't run better on the Xbox. It can't be on Game Pass or anything like that. And that sort of stuff just sucks. It's really annoying. House said difficulty balancing in racing games always messed up. It's either easy or boring and impossible and physics breaking. Forza Horizon 5 is terrible for this. Yeah, I find I quite like the way the Formula 1 games do it. Formula 1 2022, you have a driver skill setting AI, and it's like a 0 to 100 thing. And so it's like you can move it up a tiny bit, so you can just kind of find your own balance of like, okay, now the AI is challenging, but I can kind of keep up with them. So then that's kind of what I've done, and that works well. But yeah, if you've got like easy, medium, hard, often like medium's way too easy and hard is way too hard, and it's just like, that sucks. So you just end up being medium because you don't want to lose every race, because then you can't progress in the game. Blinky said, I don't like extremely grindy quests. Some grind's okay, but get 1,000 or something for good jobs sucks. Yeah, I like, I've said this in DMZ over and over again. I much prefer the quests that ask you to do one thing, or get you to do something like, hey, you need to find 20 of these in this one match. That's fine too. I just hate anywhere you're expected to do lots and lots of matches to do it. I just hate that stuff. Feels like they're wasting your time. Robert Very said, a lengthy cutscene in a boss fight. After 7 times through the spoiler-free boss fight in Survivor with 4 cut sections, I went story mode and just to get GTF on. Yeah, I felt that in Jedi Survivor. I think I know which fight you were talking about. There's a 4-phase boss fight in it, which had cutscenes between all of them. And the first 3 phases were really easy, and then the 4th phase was quite hard. But it's like, if you die in the 4th phase, you've now got to go through the first 3 phases again and all the cutscenes. You could skip the cutscenes, but the game takes a moment to like load up the cutscene and then takes a moment to skip. And it just like kills momentum, kills the immersion. That was really, really annoying. House said, I've got so many hopes for the new Forza Motorsport. Yeah, I'm super excited. I really hope with the new Forza Motorsport that it is a game where I can just join up with people and be like, hey, I want to all race in the same like power cars. Give me a selection of the same power cars, like Mario Kart. You've got 8 racers that are kind of the same. Have that and just be like, I'm going to do this set of tracks, and then you just race through them. Like, that would be super fun. I really hope there isn't like, okay, everyone bring their custom cars, like everyone bring an A-class car, bring your own car that you made, because then it's like getting new people into it is a massive pain. Some people, you'll end up with a meta where it's like, hey, this type of car says that it's A-class, but it actually drives like it's S-class. It's actually much faster. And like, if you don't know that stuff, then you don't stand a chance. Like, that sort of stuff sucks. I really hope it's good though. House UK says games are pretty cheap in reality compared to a lot of other entertainment. Cost per hour. Yeah, the cost per hour thing's always difficult because, then it makes short games look bad. But I do often think, like, a lot of games, if I think, I was listening to a thing last night where someone said they paid £19 to go see the new Guardians of the Galaxy. I paid £5 to see it, thankfully, because I've got a cheap cinema near me. But the Odeon near me is £19 to go see a film. And it's like, I don't want to be paying that much for like 2 hours. That seems like too much money. I paid £13 to watch the Grand Prix on Sunday. And that was like, okay, I'm getting like 2.5 hours of entertainment. I don't mind paying that. I do those calculations kind of thing in my head of thinking, is this worth it? And then, a lot of time with games, it's like, okay, if I'm going to play this game for like 200 hours, it's probably worth quite a lot of money to me. Like, I could probably afford to spend, I always think that Marvel Snap, I don't have to pay anything for it, but I play so much Marvel Snap, I probably play like an hour a day, that it's like, I don't mind paying for the Battle Pass every other day. I probably buy one like every 2 or 3 months. I'll buy one of the Battle Passes, and I don't mind because I'm playing so much of that game. Fortnite has 2 studios just dedicated to creating tools. Well, I mean, Fortnite are Epic, aren't they? So it's like Epic make Unreal Engine. So I imagine they do a lot of stuff for that. Alex Andrew said, I still think 70 is a lot for a single player game. You usually wait a year and get cheap keys. And that's fine for you. I mean, like, obviously, if you're getting cheap keys, you're probably not, if you're using CD keys and stuff like that, I always think that's kind of a grey market. I don't know if you're really supporting the developers, but it's, that might not matter to you whether you support the development of these games or not. I know for some people they don't care. I think, like, if you think £70 is a lot for gaming, that's fine. And there are lots of alternatives. There's lots of cheaper games, but you just kind of have to be aware that if you want the games that have had lots of money spent on them, you're probably going to have to pay more for them. I just think that's fair. It's the same sort of thing as like, I would love to have a Ferrari, but I can't afford a Ferrari, so I buy a cheaper car. I buy a Honda because I can afford that. It's like a similar thing with games, where it's like, if games are going to keep on getting more expensive to make, they're going to get more expensive to buy. And at some point, if that's not worth it to you, that's fine. That's how the market works. Like, I find it, it's crazy with a lot of the entitlement and gamers thing. We had that conversation before. There's a lot of this kind of thing of like, games need to be made for me, and they need to be at a price that I think is right, and they need to have the quality that I think is right. It's like, that's not how the market works. That's not how buying stuff works. You look at what's available and how much it costs, and you decide whether that's worth it to you or not. Obviously, if you think you're getting scammed, you think someone's promising something that they're not delivering, then that's a different conversation. But if you're getting what they advertised, then it's like, you made that decision. It's up to you. If you don't want to buy that again, then don't. Like, it's fine. I don't think anyone owes you anything to like create something for you at a price point you think is okay. I see lots of people being like, I've been playing Call of Duty for 20 years, so they need to do this, this, and this, and this, and they need to make it free. And it's like, that's not how that works. Just because you've been buying their stuff for 20 years doesn't mean you now get to tell them what to make. That's not how that works at all. Square Enix are playing some weird Hollywood accountant stuff as well, because everything's disappointing to them. Yeah, they literally, Square Enix are just, but I mean, they put their money where their mouth is. They sold a load of their IPs, didn't they? Because they were like, yeah, like, these games aren't making enough money for us, so we're going to get rid of them, which seems crazy. Durability and stamina meters bug you sometimes in games, especially Breath of the Wild. Yeah, like, I'm hoping, obviously I'll get Zelda this week, Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm very worried about the whole, weapons breaking and stamina running out when you're climbing up stuff. I really hated that in Breath of the Wild, and I'm sure it will be back in Tears of the Kingdom, and I will be annoyed. I hate it when you find a really cool weapon and then it breaks and there's no way to repair it. It's like, oh, this is so annoying. Just so frustrating. Anyway, thanks so much for everyone who's been watching. We've overrun yet again. If you want to check me out on Twitch, I'll be streaming on Twitch later. I'll stream some of Part Beyond whenever I get access to the beta. I'll also, there's a few other games I'm on stream. I might, if Cobb's about, I'll have a look, or Flynn's about, I might play some DMZ, or possibly some Redfall. Might finish that off today. But go check me out on twitch.tv/Geeky Pastimes. That's where I do basically all of my streaming now that isn't the podcast. So go check me out. And I'll see you tomorrow morning for the next episode of the podcast, where we're going to talk a lot about loadouts, and my loadouts are the worst thing ever. And by the end of it, you'll all agree with me, probably. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.